Blake. Cool. Good to be back in the studio with you,
for another
man.
episode.
As always.
Here we are.
Summer is upon us, and it's a great time to be outside. And I guess if you like the humidity and the heat that we have here in Alabama, but I know this time of year that usually means big changes coming up in the real estate market. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. What's the current conditions of things going on?
And I saw an article from NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, and said spring has sprung, but not for the real estate industry.
Really? Okay.
And what it's alluding to is the numbers, and I think I've got the stat here. Home sales receded 3.4% in April to a seasonally adjusted annual rate, 4.2 million sales. Sales fell 23% from 1 year ago. But that is not due to a lack of demand. It's due to a lack of inventory. And so it's still the same problem we've been talking about for a couple of years now. Is there's just no inventory. And so because of that, house prices are still on the rise, and sales year over year, just from a number standpoint, is lower because there's just nothing to buy.
So it's still a seller's market. Mm-hmm. Prices are still going up, but people are, I guess, exploring alternatives, renting, or just getting out, still living at home with mom and dad. I don't know. Yeah,
we're seeing that average days on market month over month from March to April from 29 down to 22. So things are selling quicker. We're back in the market. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. We're back in the market of multiple offers. Some people are having to drop inspection contingencies and really kind of taking some risks as a buyer to be able to get a home. So.
Now, did we see this? Is this new just to this time of year, or has it kind of been this way all of 2023? I mean, let's go back to January.
Yeah.
What was it looking like then?
Not much activity. We've talked about, my personal business. The first quarter of this year was probably the slowest I've had in 2 years. The national data reflects that. Birmingham data reflects that as well. Is when rates jumped in October, everything kind of paused for a little bit. And then we hit a new normal. I mean, this past week, rates went back up to roughly 6 3/4, which is high from what we've experienced in the past couple of years.
Yeah, 3%, 3.5%,
nice to see
something like
again.
that. Yeah.
And so I think people are accepting that as a new normal, or people are just having to accept it because they say, "Hey, we waited 6 months and we've got to move."
Yeah.
And so now they're entering a market that is just so competitive. It's hard to get a house.
Man. So do you have, what are your clients telling you that are trying to, I guess, and remind me, are you more in the helping people sell their home or helping people buy their home, or just a mix of both?
I do a little bit of both. I've got the team that I've got some agents that just focus on the buyer side, but I'm kind of doing a little bit of both because it's so tough right now that I'm a little bit more hands-on the buyer side than I have been in the past couple of years.
Okay.
But there's a lot of prep work as a buyer that I try to coach my clients to do to try to make yourself as attractive to a seller as possible.
Okay.
Right?
And I know we've probably beat that into the ground, but if you could, kind of lay that back out. If you are a buyer, what are some things that you can do to increase your odds of maybe finding your dream home in this competitive market?
Absolutely. So if you're a buyer looking to buy right now, number one, start with the bank. Right, get pre-approved, know exactly what you can afford and exactly what you should be able or what you should afford. So
your max all-in budget, baby.
Right. I mean, two different things, right? If a bank comes to you and says, "Yeah, we'll give you $1 million, but you only want to spend $2,800 a month," well, that's not $1 million purchase, right? That's probably closer to like a $300,000 purchase or $350,000. And so, really having those numbers and sticking to them and being comfortable where you are, so when you go in and find a house and make an offer, you don't go in just either without that knowledge or with the expectation of, oh, maybe I can push it to 380 or 390 or, oh, multiple offers, we got to go to 400. Well, let's have that conversation before we get into that emotional state of, pushing that for the house and knowing that, hey, this is above the budget that we talked about. So really having that front end meeting and setting that budget. So the next thing is being ready to make offers. And so that is in the sense of we know what we're looking for. So it's not, and again, this comes in a lot of our pre-meeting with a buyer sitting down of, you told me that you wanted to be within 20 minutes or 15 minutes of downtown Homewood because of your work and school, and that's where you do life. But then you send me a house that's in Leeds. If you've changed the criteria, let's have that conversation. But if you just send it to me because it has a pool and it looks really cool, like, should we be going to look at that? and really kind of setting that criteria and expectations. And if we do go look at it, are you comfortable making an offer if it's exactly as advertised and what drew you to it? Because I don't want to get there, you fall in love with it and say, well, it's just too far away from Homewood, so we're not going to make an offer. Why are we
It's a
here?
huge waste of time.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and just knowing, like, so honing in on that criteria and knowing really exactly what we're looking for. Another thing is if you've got a home to sell, like that's a big deal right now, because if the bank says financially you have to sell to buy, we've got to write in the contract, this offer is contingent on your current home selling. And so what can we do to make sure that if in the small chance we actually get a seller to accept your offer that has that contingency, which is a huge if right now, it's very tough to do. But if so, we've got to get your home on market immediately. And so that doesn't mean, hey, if we get an offer accepted, then we start the process of, okay, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to fix? What do we need to stage? We're doing that before we even really go look at houses, right? Because we got to be able to be ready to pull the trigger on, we've got to get on market like the day that we get an offer accepted. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so communicating that and making sure that that's understood and they're ready to go.
Right.
That's super important.
I guess it would be ill-advised. I mean, I guess every situation is different, but yeah, it sounds like if you have a home that you need to get rid of before moving into a better situation or, a different situation, make sure you don't have, go ahead and fix that guest bathroom that's been giving you problems for the past 6 months or whatever. Just make sure your home's kind of ready to go is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Well, and that's a part where I come into play a little bit on the contracting side as well as the real estate side is, if we come in and I can tell you, hey, you can renovate this bathroom for $12,000, and based off the numbers and comps that I'm seeing, and tell me if you agree as the seller, we can get an extra $25,000 out of this house. Mm-hmm. And so, do you have the funds to do it? And if so, I recommend doing it. Or do you have, or is that extra money important to you? Or is timing and ease of sale more important than the actual dollar amount?
Yeah.
So it's really kind of coming back to those goals, but being able to offer that service of here's kind of the general cost of what things are going to do, and let's pair that with analyzing the market to see what's worth doing.
Right.
So.
Man, I don't know. I feel for anybody that's trying to buy a house right now in this current market. Does it always? I mean, maybe this year is different than years prior, but it seems like in springtime, summertime, trying to buy a home, that's just the popular time for people to want to buy homes. I don't know.
Historically, it is. Yeah.
Is there anything that you could take away from that? If someone has time on their side, is there a better time of year that maybe they could look at purchasing a home that might not be as competitive, or is this just sort of? I know we keep saying this is kind of the new normal.
Yeah.
Especially with rates. I think maybe on one of the previous podcasts we talked about, you were like, if anybody's waiting for rates to change, you're gonna be waiting a while.
Yeah.
But would you advise anybody who's like maybe thinking about purchasing a home, hey, maybe wait until fall or anything like that, or is you're going to have just as good a time trying to buy one now as you would in fall?
Yeah, I don't think there's like a black and white answer. I think it depends on the person's circumstance and their situation.
Sure.
Right? Because if they've got a home that they're selling, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're not going to get both, right? You're either going to, when you sell that house, if I do my job correctly, you're going to get arguably more than you should because of the market we're in. But on the flip side of that, you're going to have to turn around and go buy something.
Buy a house at probably more than you'd want to spend.
Maybe pay more than you want to or should. So it kind of just depends on the situation. Now, if you're just a first-time home buyer, you don't have anything to sell, and you're just, hey, we've got to find something. Again, what's your timing? And if you're flexible on time, then let's go through our pre-meeting, figure out exactly your situation from a financial timing standpoint, logistically. Where do you want to be? And then let's go look at stuff, right? And let's make offers and let's see. And then also, like, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? And again, kind of one of the services that we've done before is, hey, you want to be in Avondale and you're looking for a 3.5, and your budget's $270. Well, I happen to be flipping that house right now. Do you want to come look at it and see it before the market does?
A little pitch there, yeah.
I mean, a little. So yeah, like we can do that a little bit. I don't flip a ton of houses. We've talked about it's not the focus, but that is kind of a second service that sometimes we have an advantage over being other agents. So. Yeah.
Well, with the state of the market being what it is now, what is your team looking like these days, and what do they have going on, and kind of where's their focus, I guess?
Yeah, so from the real estate standpoint, it's I guess really the biggest news is one of my assistants, and it got her real estate license to help show, so kind of like as a showing assistant. And then my other one's working on getting hers. And so that'll be helpful just from a service standpoint. So being able to say, hey, we've got to kind of divide and conquer, or while we're under contract, the client says, hey, I really needed to run by and measure the master bedroom to make sure my king bed fits. And it's, I've got an inspection I've got to be at that time, but my assistant
Get the team on help, yeah.
So being able to provide that, I think, just helps out, provide a better service to our clients.
So when things are crazy like this, or it's a buyer's market, I guess, if that's the right way to spin it.
Seller's market, yeah.
Seller's market, yeah, sorry. Is that good for your team? Is that good for you guys, being on the other side of it and buying and selling real estate? What does that do for you guys from a professional standpoint? Did I ask that correctly?
I don't think well, let me answer and make sure I'm answering the right question.
Okay.
But I don't think this market's super healthy.
Expand on that.
Yeah. So I don't think it's healthy in the standpoint of it's not sustainable. So we can't stay in this same state of low inventory indefinitely, or something's going to give, right? And rates are what have given, right? That's what give. And next, I think we're going to see prices give a little bit once inventory starts to kind of catch back up some. Because as inventory catches up, there's more supply, demand should adjust down a little bit. And so now there won't be bidding wars. Now prices just won't be crazy all over the place.
And why is that we have this such lack of inventory? This is nothing new. You know, can we just not build homes fast enough in this country? And
yeah, that's it. Because the builders took off 08 to 12. Right, so we were 4 years behind at that standpoint. We haven't caught up.
Just haven't caught up.
Yeah, we just haven't caught up since then. So that's it. And on the sales side, you know, getting ready, getting your house ready. I think it's great to do a pre-inspection and spend a couple $100 with a home inspector to say, hey, what are the items that are of concern here? And because I think that's going to help you sell. So if we can go and we list that house with a home inspection on the table that says, hey, we just had this done. Here are some big issues that came up, and here's where we fixed them. Then you may get buyers coming in saying, hey, I'll waive my inspection contingency because you've shown me you took care of a lot of that. And that reduces the risk to our sellers of the deal not going through or the deal being renegotiated.
Or if there is an issue that comes up and you're like, yeah, we know the foundation's crap, we're not fixing it, but at least now you know about it.
Yeah, and we price it accordingly.
And we price it accordingly,
yeah. So we know, and here are 3 quotes from different foundation people that it's $15,000 to fix. Here are the comps that show that it's worth $300, and we priced it
minus
at
that.
$285.
Yeah.
So I think that's good just to kind of get ahead of what's coming. And again, my job's, I think it's reducing risk to the seller on getting to the closing table with the initial offer.
Yeah, when you first started talking, I thought you were going to say the market. I always thought that this time of year is when the market got a little crazy, a frenzy going on, and it seems like lately, I guess, you know, post COVID, that's kind of been the way it is. And I've always, you know, not really knowing what the reasoning behind it. And I'm sure it's a complicated answer. It's just like, well, why can't we seem to catch up, and why is there such a lack of inventory, or are there just more millennials buying homes? I guess I don't know. You know.
Well, that's a big part of it. Is I guess our generation coming in buying their first and second house, and that's a huge wave of people coming through, and we're starting to see kind of the baby boomer generation. I mean, they're not quite at the retirement home age, right? So they're not selling their homes yet; they're still in them, and so that's a huge generation. You've got our big generation coming in and buying, so there's just a lot of demand.
Well, what do you see? Let's reach into the future a little bit. Next few months, do you see any big changes? Any big things coming down the pipe, or is this just kind of something we're going to have to get used to for the next few months?
Yeah, I think it's something we get used to. I'm not super well versed on the U.S. hitting the debt ceiling and all that change that's going on with the economy.
I haven't talked about that.
But again, from the National Association of Realtors, they mentioned in that same article that we can post in the show notes, but it was talking about how, based off the results of what happens in the next couple of weeks, we might see a rate again. Okay. And it said maybe even up to 8%.
Wow.
Which is terrifying. Like,
yeah, that is terrifying.
Again, relative historically is not crazy, but based off what we've seen in the past couple of years, that's high.
Okay, and you're referencing an article, I guess. And what article was this? And we will put a link for that.
Yeah, so it's It came out May 18th, National Association of Realtors, and it's just talking about the current national market.
Mm-hmm. So if we do hit that debt ceiling, rates could potentially go up to 8%. What's the highest you've ever seen in your career? And on the flip side, what's the lowest you've ever seen?
Yeah, I mean the lowest was 2 years ago when people were getting like 2.8.
2.8.
Just
wow,
crazy. Yeah,
that is crazy.
I mean the highest, because I've been in it 11 years. I have to go back and actually look at the stats, but I mean I think probably when it like broke 7 in the past 6 months is probably the highest I've seen.
Wow.
And so, yeah, if we're talking, again, I'd have to go back and look, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're talking about, I'm 33. I've done this since I came out of school, so if our generation or our age people have gone through buying their first house, now buying their second, maybe third house, and they're used to those sub-5 rates their entire buying professional career or grown-up career, then now going to 8 is going to be like, whoa.
Do you think the risk of the rate hike due to the debt ceiling or whatever else is going on in Congress, is that just going to add fuel to the fire? People trying to hurry up and buy a home quicker? I mean, how does that affect the market?
I don't know, because it's so unknown on what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to really give an educated answer on that, but I think what we may see if they do go up to 8 is prices coming down more quicker or more significant than they currently are, which they're really not coming down that much now. But I think we may see another slow, kind of like we saw again last October when they spiked from 4 to 6. Everything kind of slowed for a minute. Everyone's like, "What's going to happen? Let's just hold tight." We may see that again, or we may not, or people may just come in and say, "I need a house."
Yeah.
So,
well, if anybody out there is listening, don't panic. Call up my buddy Blake. You have the best chance of finding your dream home with him and his team than anybody I know. So,
well, thank you. Well, and let's think about it. It comes back. I don't think there's a black and white answer to everything. It comes back to your personal goals.
Sure, it's situational, yeah.
Right. So if you're planning on being in this house just for the next 2 years, maybe don't buy at an 8% rate. Maybe that's not the best idea. But if it's a 10, 15-year house for you, then the chances that you could probably refinance that down less than 8 in the next 5 years is probably pretty high. And so let's run the numbers and see, like, hey, does it fit your monthly budget at an 8% for what amount of dollars? And that gives us kind of a purchase price to go towards. And then as long as we can get the house you want in the budget you want, I'm not going to say the interest rate is irrelevant, but it's a little less irrelevant than if you're selling the house in just a couple of years.
Yeah, I guess there's some rules at play on, like, what's acceptable and what isn't. All right, so besides that, what else is going on in the market? You mentioned a couple articles before we got started that were pretty interesting. What else is happening in the world?
In that same article, I found this interesting, but all cash sales accounted for 28% of transactions in April, and it was 27% in March and 26% March of last year. So that's made up a lot of individual investors, second home buyers. That made up about 17% of all home sales in April and in May. But and this was interesting, distressed sales, foreclosures, and short sales only represented 1% of all the sales in April. But starting with that first point, all cash, I mean, you've got 28%, I mean, almost a third of all transactions being done in April were cash.
Is that nationwide, or is that just in our market?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the whole market. So, I mean, put that in perspective. If you're a buyer going out that, a first-time home buyer that's budget's $300,000 and you're getting it financed, like, it's really, really hard to be competitive.
Sure.
It's really hard to be competitive with.
Who are these cash buyers?
Well, so 17% of them are individual investors or second home buyers, right? Okay. So it's you buying a lake house to Airbnb, right? Gotcha. Or it's me buying a house in Avondale to flip if I'm using cash, right? And that's, which I'm not, but like there's a lot of investors that are. And so just, for my simple brain, when you say an all cash purchase, does that literally mean they are walking up, they're not backed by any kind of financial institution, they got money in hand, let's buy this just like I'm buying a soda or anything else? $300,000 in their bank account, they wire it to the attorney, and they buy it.
Boom, mine.
Yeah.
Wow, man, what must that be like?
Yeah, right, yeah. So if you're competing with that,
it's hard.
It's hard.
But as a seller, why is that more attractive?
Well, it's less risk. So it's not going to get appraised. So the bank doesn't have to give their check mark or stamp of approval on the value of the contract. Okay. So if someone was buying a $300,000 house and the bank appraised it for $250,000, then that buyer has the right to either back out of the contract or renegotiate the sales price.
Gotcha.
And so to a seller, if it's a cash deal that doesn't have that risk, then
Cash deals are just simpler, I guess.
they're simpler. They also, you don't have to worry about the buyer being approved for that financing, or the buyer the day before closing losing their job and then not being able to get financed.
And now everything that
And
you've been
then it
doing
doesn't
is just
close.
falling through,
Yep.
and had other offers that maybe they've gone on and done something else.
cash
so.
is cash. I had there's one listing that closes next month that we're under contract for. We got 3 offers. The highest offer was right at 70,000 over list price, all cash, and they wrote a personal check. So their earnest money is normal. It's part of the transaction. Usually it's 1% of the sales price. It goes to the closing attorney or the listing office, right? It's made out to Arc Realty or Heights Title, and it's part of the transaction. It's just like, hey, I'm serious about buying the house. Here's a little bit of money up front, but it doesn't go to the seller.
Sure.
This transaction, 70,000 over list price, they wrote a $20,000 check directly to my seller and said,
Bob Smith, here you go.
Yeah, and it says in the contract, if for any reason this buyer backs out of the contract, period, the sellers get to keep the $20,000. Go
Wow.
cash it today. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I've never
You don't
seen
see that very often.
I've never seen that. I'm like, that is just wild. So like the risk, so obviously we took that offer. The risk to my seller is so low. Like, it wasn't contingent on inspection. It was cash as is. We'll take it, close whenever y'all want to close. I mean, the risk to my seller is just next to zero.
Yeah.
All right. So
Cash is king, baby.
cash is king.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that is wild. I'm glad I'm not trying to buy my first home right now. It's hard to compete with cash or someone out that makes an offer like that. Here's $20,000 that even if I back out, you can just keep it.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I don't know. I just feel I know, going back, and I've told you this story, we were very fortunate to buy where we bought, the area of town that I live in now, which I guess it's true anywhere across the state nowadays, it sounds like, but we're over in Avondale, which is kind of an up-and-coming area. It has been for about the past 10 years. And the house that we looked at was on the market for 11 days, and we had multiple offers. There were multiple offers on the home. And by some miracle, they chose us. We were able to get the financing straightened away. We weren't working with you, but our realtor did a great job, and we're very thankful to be where we are. But just what we had to deal with, man, it was a roller coaster. You know what I mean? There was another house previous to that we looked at that I think had been on the market, at the time for like a week. They hadn't had any offers. The day we put our offer in, 2 other offers come in, and the seller went with somebody else. And so my wife was just crushed, which in hindsight, it worked out because it needed some work. But I feel for anybody that's out there trying to purchase a home right now and competing with those cash offers, or especially in the market that we're in. Kind of changing gears a little bit, though, being in the construction world and doing all the stuff that you do behind the scenes. What are some things that people could get there? Summer's right around the corner, home maintenance. I know I need to get my air conditioner inspected, I'm sure. What are some things that people can be doing, maybe if they're getting ready to sell their home, or just general maintenance on their home to maybe keep their bills down a little bit?
Yeah, there's definitely some general maintenance that, if ignored, can lead to bigger problems. So HVAC service, that's a big one. Do that twice a year. Outside condenser, your air conditioning part of it in the spring, and then heat in the fall. And another thing, so a lot of people have a condensate pump. So when you run your air conditioner, it sweats and creates condensation. And if it's not like a gravity fed just drain outside, then a lot of times, like in my house, I've got this little pump, and it pumps the water all the way to the outside. Mm-hmm. When water just sits in there, especially over the winter, it can just mold and kind of get clogged up.
Yeah.
So a good thing to do, really recommendations once a month, but I'm not good at it. Usually once or twice a year, I'll pour bleach in there and just kind of run it through and just let it clean the lines a little bit. That's important, because if that backs up, a lot of times, luckily ours is in the basement and it's unfinished, but a lot of times those can be in the attic. And if that backs up, you've got water coming through your ceiling. So it can lead to a big problem, but it's super easy to do. Bleaching the condensate pump is a pretty quick and easy one. Check your fire detector, your smoke detectors, your carbon monoxide detectors. We've had some crazy storms this past week, and actually grabbing a drink with a buddy of mine who's a retired firefighter, and he lives over by 280, and 2 doors down, he's in townhomes, 2 doors down from his, got hit by lightning and caught fire this past week. Yeah, and it's just crazy. I mean, it was the middle of the day. He wasn't there. Like, it didn't come over to his unit, so he was fine. But, I mean, just think we've had, again, crazy storms this week. What if that was in the middle of the night? It was 2 doors down, so it didn't wake him up, and smoke comes over. You know, so having those things, just get batteries in there, make sure they're working correctly. That's
things we should all do that we just ignore.
Yeah, and so it's a good, hey, springtime, here's my checklist, here's what to go through. A lot of rain in the cold
They're
season.
weed eating, by the way, anybody that's listening right now. So
Background
forgive
noise.
us. Yeah, but we're going to keep on going. So
A lot of rain in the cold season, so walking around your house, if you have wood siding, soffits, fascia board, just check it, make sure it didn't rot. A lot of those, you'll see before rot happens, either the paint start to fade or the caulk lines kind of split.
start peeling off. Or
And same thing with your windows, the caulk around them. It's always good once a year to go through with a tube of caulk, clear or white, and just go through and just hit all those spots, right? That's just going to stop water from penetrating where it doesn't need to go and then lead to bigger problems.
Yeah.
So that's a big one.
Clean your gutters.
Clean your gutters.
That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
We have a giant oak tree in the front of our house, and it's I'm convinced that oak trees were put here by the devil himself because they shed like 4 times a year, just about. Not only in the fall, but also in the springtime, they drop like these pollen pods, and they're like, especially when they get wet, they're like micro wet mops, and they just clog everything. They stain your sidewalks, and just apart from all the other trash that they drop. So that's something I try to keep up with because I can always tell when my gutters are clogged. If we get a big rain, it just starts water falling down the side of the house, and I'm just like, dang it. And I feel like I stay on top of it a lot more than, not to throw my neighbors under the bus, but I have a couple of neighbors on my street where it's like, I know y'all's gutters haven't been cleaned in years. And I can only imagine, I can imagine that does a lot of damage, not only to the foundation, but also to the home.
Yeah, it can,
having that
especially.
proper.
Yeah, and another thing to do is just kind of check the grading and your water flow and drainage around the house. So if they are clogged and you've got a waterfall coming off in a spot that is graded kind of at your house, that can lead to water problems.
Definitely.
Down in a finished basement, which a foundation company and waterproofing company is going to tell you I had a quote last week for a client, it's $25,000.
Wow.
Well, we're going to fix gutters and regrade the exterior and potentially fix that for like $2,500, right?
Yeah.
So there are ways around that, but like the person who doesn't know those things, they've got a $25,000 problem on their hand just because they didn't clean their gutters, right? So definitely can lead to bigger issues, but that's a pretty simple thing. Next, if you've got an irrigation system, check it, make sure your pipes didn't freeze. We had some crazy multiple low cold days, low temperature days this winter. So you could have a lot of frozen pipes in your irrigation. So check those for leaks because that could run your water bill up. And then in addition to that, this happened to my house, but we had 2 or 3 days in a row that it just didn't get above like 25, and it just killed a lot of my bushes.
Really?
Yeah, so that's more of an aesthetic thing. Kind of same thing with pressure washing your driveway. It doesn't. It improves the look of your house, maybe the value of your house because it looks better, but from a damage standpoint, it doesn't really damage anything.
Sure.
But that's just good to do to have a good-looking house.
Yeah. So stay on top of the general maintenance.
Yeah, general maintenance. So, and that's it. You knock those things out, you should avoid most of the big issues, but
okay. Well, it's always good to catch up, man, and we'll see how the summertime goes for you guys. I'm sure you guys will be super busy, and always great to kind of hear what's happening, and gives me some, iron sharpens iron, some things I need to go home and check out my AC. Go rake out all the leaves that have just gathered all around it and all that stuff. So, yeah. Well, good catching up, man.
Cool. Until next time.